Hi there. So it's been a minute since I've put up anything. I've been quite busy. Super, super annoying. I want to get back to writing Fortunate Son, but I won't be able to. What is it, the third, fourth? I won't be able to get back to it until about maybe 10 days, 8 days, 9 days. I really want to get done with it. It's not typically the way it goes. Usually I sort of attack something and finish it in one run. But in this case it's been broken up and it's really, truly not ideal at all. Not happy about it. So I thought I have to leave town actually in the morning, so I thought I'd stop and just post something real quick. I wanted to expand on something that I was talking about the other day, which was structure. I'm always talking about structure. Structure, structure, structure. Let me turn that off. And I was talking about endings. And I thought about it more after I spoke, and the elaboration that I wanted to make is that because structure is very hard for people to understand, and it's hard for me to explain. It's really only about after writing sort of endless scripts and writing for so long, you kind of instinctively understand it. And I think we all instinctively actually understand it because we've all seen so many movies, but sometimes people get in their own way and they don't just sort of let structure flow. But I thought it was a good corollary to actually say that structure it simply exists as a framework to make your point. Your entire reason you sit down to write is to make a point. You want to make a point about something, not necessarily an idea. It can be an idea, intellectual idea, but more often than not an emotional idea. You want to make the audience truly feel something and or understand something about life in a way that maybe you hadn't looked at it before or was profound. And you could simply just start out and state your point immediately. You could just do that. But what fun would that be? So structure is a way to allow you to kind of stretch out your argument. And movies are a lot like a debate, I think. And the structure is the form of your debate. The first act is essentially you establishing what the subject you're talking about is, why you, the viewer, should care, and why the world at large should care. In other words, why this is important and why it is interesting. And usually the end of the first act or the first act turn, quote-unquote, inciting incident. I really don't like terms like that because these things don't actually exist, but they do have some utility. That's usually the moment where you suddenly draw your viewer in to understanding why this is interesting. All of a sudden you think, ooh. And then the second act is you elaborating and laying down the factual argument for the thesis, your thesis, fundamentally, which you're trying to do. And then the third act is when you've captured your audience's interest, you've laid out all of the information they need to understand what your argument's going to be, but they don't know it yet. Although sometimes they can see where you're going. But then the third act is where you suddenly spring the trap, and you very suddenly make your point. And that's sort of one of the better ways I can think of to describe what structure is. In other words, I think a lot of people wonder, why is there structure? Well, that's a really good question. I don't think anybody knows. But movies without structure don't really seem to work for human beings. Like the other day I was talking about the difference between humans and aliens and squirrels and frogs, and I think we would all, because our brains are different, perceive structure differently. But for some reason, structure is largely necessary. It's hard to think of a movie that was successful that doesn't have structure. Easy Rider, maybe you could say, doesn't have structure, but it's episodic too. So in that sense, it does have structure. There are interesting exceptions to things. You know, you look at Speed, which I'm pretty sure has 5-act structure, which is quite unusual. You look at Ghost. Ghost has a really mystifying structure and a mystifying mixture of tones too. So these rules aren't absolute. Nothing's absolute because structure doesn't exist. But it might be helpful for some of you, and maybe not, to look at structure as a way, as a framework by which you illustrate your point, starting with stating what you're going to be talking about and why it's interesting. In the second act, laying out all the facts along the way that support, what you originally said, and then in the third act, you make your point. You state your point. In the first act, you state your thesis, and in the third act, you state your conclusion. The conclusion being, again, either intellectual or even possibly emotional. So, I don't know if that's going to be helpful or confusing to some people, but I think because it's simple and it relates to the things that something else we know, which is fundamentally debate. It's debate, except you use sort of the most entertaining tools you can to make your argument. And anyway, I hope that's helpful. I will see you guys next week, those of you who are interested in this kind of thing. And that's all she wrote. Bye.